Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 32 of the Dream Life Loading podcast. I'm your co-host, Skye.
And I'm your co-host, Susan. How are you today, Skye?
I'm good. I just realized I completely changed the intro there, and I'm like, did I mess it up? Because I never
I
say
know.
it
I
that
was kind
way.
of thinking back.
Oh my God, I'm like sweating.
I
I
liked
don't
it
know why I
though.
did that. Well, we're here, episode 32. We made it. So funny. I'm like, do you think we can make it through without redoing it? And I guess we can, but I'm good. I don't know. We had such a traumatic afternoon yesterday. I'll spare everybody all the details, but we had a bird fly into our apartment, and I don't even know if I told you the full story of this. I went to pick Nick up. He had been gone. Picked him up, and we get back to the house, to the apartment, and I saw what I knew to be bird poop on the ground because my mom has a bird. So I'm like, I'm very familiar with bird poop, unfortunately. And I'm like, that's so weird. There's bird poop on the ground. And like, we don't have AC, and Europe doesn't do screens on windows. So like, it's just the way it is. Like, bugs come in and out. We've never had issues other than like some flies. And I had left everything open because I just went 5 minutes down the road to pick them up, whatever. So I'm like, I see bird poop. I'm like, that's so weird. No birds, nothing's like messed up. So I'm like, okay, the animal must have flown in, freaked out, and flew out. It's like we're just hanging out. He's unpacking, so we're just in the bedroom, whatever. And we hear like some scratching. And I'm like, that's weird. Like, I don't know. This is, and if you know, I am terrified of birds. Like, I am deathly terrified of birds. So I'm like, I don't know. Like, we would know. Like, no way that there's an animal in here. Like, we would absolutely know. Continue unpacking, whatever. And then it's like super scratchy. Like, something, and I was like, okay, something's in here. Nick gets the hockey stick out. We're like poking at everything. We're like trying because like something's here, but it doesn't want to leave. So he opens up, like, fortunately, our bedroom opens up, like the window's fully open. So it was like a huge open space. So Nick opens everything up. I am standing in the hallway at this point. I have checked out. He starts to move all the drawers out of our dresser, slowly moving everything out. And finally, he moves the final piece of the dresser, moves it. The bird flies up. Nick shoots back and screams. I start hyperventilating. I am sweating. I am crying. I am screaming. The bird flies into the window and then finally does fly out. Oh my God. Like trauma, like drama, everything. This was terrible. Like terrible. So I feel like the way the podcast started today, the trauma of yesterday, we are full chaos, but we're making it through.
You know what's funny is that Sarah is also petrified of birds. So it's
I
just
knew
very
this.
ironic that two of my closest friends are terrified of
Mhm.
birds. But that would be like if there was a snake in my house. I would have this exact reaction. Like 1000%.
But like,
Terrible.
and now I'm just thinking like constantly, I'm like, oh my God, it was here and we didn't know. You know, like we kind of knew, but
Yeah.
like that bird was here for probably, I mean, I don't even know how long it was here when I was gone. And then it was still here for probably like 30 plus minutes when we got back. Like, just imagine like what else is in here. Now I'm like on high alert. Like, I'm living with nature. How was your weekend?
Yes. Your Italian birds. My weekend was good. Chris went to hunter's safety camp and he passed his class, so he is now a hunter. God help us. And I had a working weekend. I stayed at his grandmother's house where there's no service, and I literally just busted out so much work. So I had a great weekend, and I feel productive, rejuvenated, and ready for another great week. And it's gonna
Was
be in the 80s here.
Oh my God, I was literally just going to ask, how was the weather this weekend for you guys?
It was overcast and kind of dreary, which was fine because I
Okay,
sat
yep.
like in a bay window and just like did my work.
This is the house I went to, right? Like, this is the lake house.
No, this is his grandmother's
Oh,
house, which is
oh,
arguably way more beautiful.
oh. Is it on the water?
No, but it's in the
Okay.
mountains. Like you look
Oh,
outside and
gorgeous.
like fields, mountains. We saw a deer. Like
What a nice, I know you worked, and I think that's literally incredible that, like, not only that you did, but you had like the motivation and the desire and all the things, but just even getting away from your space and just being able to
yeah.
like disconnect, reset. Like,
Mhm.
I feel like if and when you write your next book, escaping to that house and just like locking yourself in and just writing and having like your own mini little like writer's retreat feels like such a nice environment for something like that.
And that's, I was talking to my mom about it because she was like, "Oh, how's your weekend? How's Chris?" And I was like, "I got so much work done." And she was like, "Honestly, it makes sense because if you were at home, you would have been cleaning, cooking, working in the
Yes.
nursery. She's like, you never would have sat down and actually done all of those things." So she's like, "That sounds like such a good use of your weekend." So pretty much
Yes.
everything for Dream Life Floating, all of that stuff is done through until well after I come back from maternity leave, which is nice.
I I love that for us, and I've told you a million times, and I will continue to thank you for that. But even more than the way I love how you've set us up for success for the next couple months, I love it for you because you can have your baby and you can just sit back and fully focus on baby and not worry about like, oh, well, I'm behind on this or I should do this. It's like there is no should other than I should be with my baby. And I love that for you. And just like this, it's all off your shoulders because you're like, I did
Yeah,
everything. It's done. It's all I mean, in a way, that's nesting. You're like, you got all your ducks in a row to get ready to
yeah,
have your baby. It's like, I don't have to worry about anything other than this baby, which is such a freeing feeling, I would assume.
yeah. I'm doing the same routine with my regular work this week, so I'm hoping that all of my maternity leave stuff is prepped and done by the end of this week. Um, and then I can just kind of like post into it and enjoy it.
Yes. Ugh. And I think we were talking about this
So
before we
we
got
don't have a
on
good
the.
set. Oh,
Oh no, we were both going to try and make a segue. I was going to try and make one about like setting boundaries with like about to give birth and everything. So we'll just dive in.
so I was
We
gonna
can
say
go.
there's no segue. I know I like your attempt. So today's podcast episode is the people pleaser's guide to saying no. Because as if you've been here for a while, Skye and I are both recovering people pleasers, and we're in our saying no era.
Mhm. Yes, we are. And we talked about this. We kind of started to go into a tangent on it last week, and then we stopped ourselves and we were like, wait a minute, let's just dedicate a whole episode to it. And I feel like this is something I feel like we did before we were on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I think we did an
Yeah,
episode about maybe even just saying no, boundary setting, something along those lines. But I feel like at this phase of life that we're both in, I think we've learned a lot more and started even practicing more actually how to say no. I think a year plus ago, we were both like, oh, yeah, like it's okay to say no. And it's like we knew that, but now we're actually practicing it. So I'm really excited to just dive in and just go into it and just like let's let go of our guilt. I think that's like the biggest thing, just no guilt.
absolutely. So I made a say no checklist.
Cute.
Yes, absolutely. So my saying no checklist is, does it align with the life you want? If it's a no, you can say no. Does going or participating make you feel good? If the answer is no, then say no. Have you had time to rest in the last 2 weeks or set your own timeline? Like for me, if we've had 2 weekends back to back with stuff, no, don't sign me up. Like that's like last weekend we had my baby shower. This weekend we were away Friday through Sunday. We have not rested. And then people were like, "Oh, are you coming to this next weekend?" And I was like, "No, we might, but I'm saying no. So if we do come, then like it's fun. But if we don't want to, we don't have to."
Mhm.
Um, does it give you anxiety days before? If the answer is yes, then you say no. Um, does it benefit or empower you? If the answer is no, then don't go. Is it a positive environment? No, don't go. Do you actually need to do this? Like, I try to ask myself at least three of those questions before I say no to something.
Yep.
And but once I do, like if I said no to three of those and I say no to the person or the event or whatever it is, I can feel no guilt in saying no.
Yes. I think it's my Wi-Fi. It's not you. I think you cut out at the end of that, but I think we got the gist of the checklist. And I think it would be really cool to put that into a graphic so that
Mhm.
if you probably already were thinking of doing that, so that when we post the episode, that's kind of
Yes.
like side note when we're editing this. But I love the visual. I've been like picturing it in my mind. And I kind of did something similar Because basically what you're doing is you're setting a boundary. And it seems like so many of those questions, like if you're going through it, like trying to decide if you're going to say yes or no, it's like, well, obviously this isn't going to give me joy. Like that's why I don't want to go, but I feel forced to go. And it's like, well, the questions are going to be obvious to answer, and just answer them truthfully and do what they're guiding you in the direction of doing. Like don't overthink it. If you don't want to go to something and it doesn't serve you, don't go. Like that's point blank. So I wrote down setting boundaries with yourself and then others. And I had 3 different things to list out, so kind of a similar vibe. I had list things you're not available for, list people you're not available for, and then list things you want or need. And I feel like if you make those lists ahead of time and then you're trying to decide about an event, do Susan's checklist and then also go through and see, where does this event or situation, whatever, fall on those lists? Does it fall in something you need, or does it fall in a section that you are not available for? And it's going to be a very easy way to, and you're setting clear boundaries. It's like you don't have to question anything because you've already set yourself up to be able to answer and move on. Like don't even think twice about it.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is saying no doesn't make you a bad person. And I think I know we talked about this last week too, but Chris and I were really bad about saying no for a lot of things. And finally we came to that realization, and I was like, if we don't go, it's not the end of the world. Like it doesn't make us bad people because we don't want to or can't attend something.
Mm-hmm.
And just really like digesting that statement will make saying no so much easier.
Absolutely. The first thing I wrote down was, by saying yes to others when you don't want to, you're saying no to yourself. So
Mhm.
even if you're like, okay, I'll say yes, it's easier, you're still giving out a no. So would you rather give out a no to somebody or something that's not going to serve you, or give out a no to yourself? Like you never want to say no to yourself. You're the one person that you should always be pleasing at the end of the day. Like you have to do what works for you. And if an event, we're using event, but you can do this with literally any situation. But like just for example, if an event does serve you, then it's an easy double yes. But if it doesn't serve you, at least give the yes to yourself of saying no to what doesn't work for you.
I think this is also a perfect example of this. Was You're going to know exactly what I'm talking about too. We were at UNH, and we lived in the same building, so we would walk to our classes together. Guy came to my room, she knocked on my door, and I don't know if you were in tears, but you were like, I can't go today. And I was like, I can't go today. Like, I feel so anxious. And we went and we got coffee instead, and we got so much work done.
Yep.
And we said no to going to that class. That was a class where you had like 3 absences or something. So it wasn't like we weren't gonna fail because we didn't show up that day. I don't think either of us had skipped a college class at this point.
Mm-mm.
And that day was so beneficial for both
Yep.
of us, like mentally, emotionally,
Mm-hmm.
and productivity, because we got a lot done in that coffee shop.
Yes.
And just so
God,
nice.
and that class was so boring, honestly. Like that was such a bad class. So I remember it got to a point at the end of towards the end of that semester that we were like, okay, I think it was 5 skips. I think it was like a very
Yeah,
loose,
it was a lot.
right? So we hadn't used a lot of them. We had used that one together, but then towards the end of the semester, we were both like, all right, I got 4 left. How can we stagger these? Like the weather's going to be nice. Let's absolutely skip this day because it was just so boring. And it did not
Yeah,
serve me. Like that class did nothing for me. So I'm very glad that we said no all 5 times that we were allotted.
yeah. 1000%. Not that we're promoting like not going to your classes that you paid for, but we would have, I think the moral of this story is that time is valuable.
Yep.
Spend it accordingly.
Yes.
We
Spend
didn't
it with
waste
what
it.
works for you.
Yeah, and we didn't spend it rotting in that god awful class.
Yep. Speaking of things that we're not promoting, but we also are kind of promoting, I feel like this is a perfect time because there's situations with sometimes you want to say no, but it's just not. I think honesty is always the best policy. And I think, especially with situations where you're invited to something and you just genuinely don't want to go, just say no. I think people really respect that. And I know we touched on that and we'll probably go into it later in the episode too. But I understand that sometimes it's not easy or feasible to say no. Like sometimes people, how people are, there are people that just do not respect a no and they will not take a no for an answer in
Mhm.
those situations. Or if it's like a work event or like a group gathering where like you really know you should go, but like you just can't do it, whatever. I'm not against a little white lie. I'm really not. And I think if it's half true, to get yourself out of a bad situation, and bad, I mean like you don't want to go. Like it's not anything dangerous. If it's dangerous, say no and move on, obviously. But like if you got to say you have a work meeting and maybe your work meeting's at 10 but the event doesn't start till 4, like it's a little white lie. You still have a work
Yeah.
meeting. It's going to happen. Get yourself out of these situations. And like it's a fake lie. Like I wouldn't do anything big and say like, oh, well, I have this event, so I have to go to that instead, because you're gonna get caught up in that. But like a little white lie, get yourself out of it. And if you need to do little things like that to get yourself comfortable with then like the full definite no, I think it's a
Yeah.
good stepping stone. I wouldn't say that that's your go-to, not at all. But like if you need that to get you comfortable with disappointing people, because somebody's going to be disappointed when you say no, and when you get to the point where you're over the guilt of disappointing people, then you can just say no. But use the white lie as a stepping stone.
Or if you're dealing with someone who won't just take a no as a boundary, and you're dealing with someone who's going to ask you 30 friggin' questions on why you can't go, it might be easier just to have a little something lined up of
Yes.
like, no, because.
Yep. I think that's great. I think I love that. My default is vague but polite. And I've gotten better
Mm-hmm.
with this. And I will not say sorry. I think that's something that I was really really bad about, was always apologizing. Switch sorry with thank you. So like let's say Susan invites me, she's like, "Hey, like do you want to come to dinner tonight? It's me and like 30 of your closest friends." I'm like, "Wow, that sounds terrible. Like that's so many people and I hate situations like that." So
Yeah.
because now like obviously we're close enough, I would say, "Thank you for inviting me. I do not like big group things like that. So maybe you and I can get dinner together next week. But thank you for inviting me." Polite, simple,
Yeah.
honest, but I'm not going to say, sorry, that doesn't work for me, because I don't have anything to be sorry for. I'm very appreciative that I was invited, but it doesn't work for me. And I think that takes the guilt away, because if you automatically say sorry, now the other person assumes that you've done something to be sorry for. And we don't need to
Yeah.
put that context out there, or not the context. We don't even need to put that as an option. Like there's nothing to be sorry for.
Absolutely. And I also had my notes that saying no is simply setting a boundary. It doesn't make you a bitch. I don't care if
Yes.
anyone tells you that by saying no, you're being a bitch. Like, I can already see it. There's going to be dozens of events that people want Chris and I and the baby to go to that I'm just going to say no. Like,
Yeah.
I either don't want to go, or I don't want to pass my baby around, or it's going to be the holidays and people are going to be sick, and no, you're not gonna like hold her like a football. And I already can tell. I'm gonna hear, oh, you're a helicopter mom, you're overprotective, you're a bitch. Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Yep. Yep.
And I think that's a little bit easier to say no for, because I'm advocating for someone else who doesn't have an immune system yet.
Yep.
But in the same hand, like if you're not comfortable with something, you can say no. And the other thing is, saying no is like a muscle. You have to train it. You have to do it repetitively before it gets stronger, and with strength it gets easier. So
Yeah.
I think that that saying no, the two things that I always think of as a muscle are saying no and asking for more, like asking for a raise or asking for whatever it is you want. But those two things, they're like just like a muscle.
Yeah. And it's a really important muscle. I think equally they both are. And I think I know, at least for me, and I know the same is true for you, learning to say no and let that be not your default, but just let it be as much of an option as your yes,
Yeah.
opens you up so much, because you feel like, I mean, I wrote down, I was like, what's worse, doing something you don't want to do or just politely declining? Like you say no, that was a 5-minute interaction and it's over, versus if you say yes because you feel like you have to, now you're stuck doing this thing that you're going to stress about before, like you said, you're going to have anxiety about it probably days leading up to, and then the day of is going to be terrible. You're going to go, you know what, maybe 1 out of 5 times you do end up having a good time at the event. Sure, great, awesome, I'm glad it worked out. But most of the time you go, you're not happy to be there, and then you leave and you feel bad because now you have like the anxiety of it, where you're like, oh my
Mhm.
God, people probably thought I wasn't having a good time. It's like, because you weren't, so it's like all these different bad parts of saying yes to something you don't want to say yes to, versus the 5-minute interaction of declining, politely declining.
Absolutely. And saying no without guilt will set you free.
Yep. I agree.
Okay. That wraps up my notes.
I know this was kind of quick. I feel like we're so passionate about it. We were just like firing off.
We've gotten
Um,
really good at saying
I
no.
know, I know. I guess we have. Um, oh, I said, what are you afraid of? Like, why that was like, I just written down, I was like, literally, what are you afraid of? And I think that's a question you could ask yourself. Even like I kind of wrote it down as a rhetorical question, but you could actually ask, like, okay, if I say no, what am I afraid of? And is it like, oh, I'm going to get fired if I don't go to this? And it's like, okay, maybe that's a repercussion that you should suck it up and go. Or is it like, oh, this friend might be upset with me? And it's like, if that's a true friend, they're going to understand. Like, so I think that could be on your checklist. Like, what, like that's, I guess it's less of a check and more of like, you actually have to answer it with more than just a yes or no. But still, like, these are like tools you can use when you're going into these situations to kind of like work that muscle of saying no.
Absolutely.
Um, what was I gonna say? Oh, finding a safe person. We talked about this a little bit last week, but I think this is something that's really helped me. I know if you're in a situation where it's like friends or colleagues, you probably have one person already that's like a safe person that you could go to and just say, honestly say, like, look, I'm not comfortable at this event. Like, I'm going to say no, or I am saying no to you, whatever it may be. And you have one person that you've completely confided in, because maybe other people you're vague and you say, like, oh, I can't go. Thanks for inviting me. But you choose one person to open up to, strengthen that bond. But if you're in a new situation and you don't have somebody that's your safe person to turn to, maybe you use those little white lie excuses at first and you have the work meeting or like my dog's sick, whatever. But then you kind of find someone over time, look for the person that's like, oh, we missed you last weekend. Like, was everything okay? Like, that person is someone, they're expressing interest in you. Turn to them and open up to them in the future, build that relationship. And then maybe you do end up going to more events because you know that you have that safe person that, like, okay, well, this isn't my favorite thing, but this person's awesome and I can turn to them, so I'm going to choose to go. Like making it
Right.
making it work for you. I think at the end
Yeah,
of the day.
absolutely.
That was kind
What a
of
good
all I had. Yeah. I love it. Short and sweet. We've had some long ones, so I think it's good.
yeah.
Keep it short.
Favorites?
Favorites?
Well, my
You
favorite,
start us off.
we already talked about it, but just my maternity leave prep and like the fact that I'm realistically 75% done. And then like I think it's gonna be like stressful in itself of like having a baby and like learning to keep her alive. But I think that this is gonna be the most relaxed I've ever been. I already feel more relaxed than I ever have. And I think it's just because I'm not gonna have 3 million things running through my mind. I know that I did the work up front, so everything is running smoothly and I don't need to stress about it. Like at my regular full-time job, I've already tested
Yeah.
what I have in place. Like I tested the people I had like the person taking over X do it and we ran it through May and it worked. Like I feel fully prepared. Like on all the other fronts
Yeah.
of my life so that I can really focus on her and
Yes.
life.
And I think we talk so much about setting yourself up for success. And like we do that by creating routines and like setting reminders and to do lists and all these different things. And you've really taken that and done it to the full extreme. Like there are obviously so many parts of being a first time mom that you cannot prepare for. Like you don't know how your baby's going to be, like all these different variables that you cannot control. You've, instead of freaking out about that, you've instead chosen to focus on everything that you can control and fully set yourself up for success. Your baby's going to be born and there is only one thing you have to focus on, versus now it's like, okay, well, I have this, and I should probably focus on this and also this and maybe this one too. One track mind. And I think that's going to be so beneficial for you. And you can really just appreciate, like, I hate how short of a time you get for maternity leave, honestly. Like, I think you should get a year truly to be with your baby. But since you only get a short amount of time, I love that you're going to be able to just fully focus on her and Chris and nothing else. You, Chris,
Mm-hmm.
and the baby, and literally nothing else. And I think that's going to be so beneficial, and just the memories and all the things. It's just set yourself up for success. I'm so excited.
And it's summertime. It's gonna be so nice. I'm
Yes.
very excited.
Yes. I have kind of like three favorites because I couldn't pick, and I was like, they're all kind of different. So I'll fire off the first two. My gym sneakers, because we talked about these last week,
Mhm.
but they were too new. It's like I just got them. They cannot be my favorite yet, but I'm obsessed with them. They're giving like Barbie
Cute.
Beach summer. And I actually like I had been wanting them for a long time, but I had never tried them on, which was a huge risk. I'm realizing looking back on it, but I love how they feel when I work out. Like I really feel like I'm like very stable when I stand, which obviously is the point, but they look great, but they also feel great and they do great things. So I'm loving those. We recently got a vacuum, which we have lived here for 2 years now. Nick's been here for 3 years. Never have had a vacuum in any of the apartments that Nick has lived in, that we've lived in. Never had a vacuum. Finally got a vacuum and it's been life changing. And then my final, this was like my main favorite, was doodling. I have been so bad about using my journal and I just have not been motivated to like sit down and write. And I know there's phases of life where I do feel very motivated, like every single morning or every single night to sit down and like write about my day or write about whatever. And I just haven't been in that headspace. It's like, I want to still be journaling. Like, I want to still keep up with that. So I've switched to doodling and I just go on Pinterest and I'm like, things to doodle in my journal. And it's like silly, stupid little doodles, but it keeps me motivated. It keeps me creative. And it's been so much fun. And it's so cute to look back
You
on.
know what's so funny that you brought that up because last week, hold on, I don't want to knock everything over. Last week, I literally dug this out, and this is my stickers and like cutouts to like magazine cutouts for my journal. And I picked up my journal
Oh,
last week and I started doing it again. And the little printer that you got me hooked on, my sticker
yes.
printer. And I'm so excited. This we're gonna use a lot this summer. Can we give them a little tease?
Yes.
Okay, so the Change Your Life in 100 Days challenge is coming out in June. And the way we set it up is essentially like a scrapbook of all your
For
activities.
sure.
So
Yep.
I'm gonna document Julia's and I's entire summer. Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
Um, um, all her name was on all the baby shower stuff. So like literally in my YouTube video last week, I was like, if you guys really want to hunt for it, you can look for it.
Yep.
If not, it'll be a surprise when she's born.
I was
But
trying the whole episode. I'm like, you and baby, you and baby. And I'm like, I don't want to say her name.
I
So I'm glad
tried.
you said
It's
it.
like
Yep.
whatever. Her
Yep.
middle name will be a surprise when she's
Yes.
born.
Hmm.
But we're gonna document our whole summer with our little sticker Polaroid printer thingy. And I'm so excited.
It's going to be so cute. But I love that we both are in this phase of like just trying new things to keep up with
Yeah.
journaling. Like just see what works. Again, what works for you. Right now,
Literally,
it's not writing.
the first batch of stickers that I got were from the dollar store. Like you don't need to
Oh, no.
invest a ton to change it up.
Yep.
But
And if
it's
you
worth
don't, I know those printers aren't cheap. Like it was a choice. It was like, okay, this is going to be an investment. We're going to use it. Like it's not
Yeah, that
cheap.
was my birthday present.
Yeah. But you can even like just print on regular like printer paper and just tape it in. Like that's what I was doing before we got the printer and it works perfectly fine. Like it doesn't have to be anything crazy fancy.
Right. Quotes?
What is your quote? Yes.
Mine is keep your mind on the goal and your heart on the why. And I feel like that just fits in so much with today's episode because I feel like it's so easy to let your mind like wander, especially if you're put in a situation where you're asked to go to something and you don't want to go. But like, I think the most important question on that checklist is does it align with the life you want?
Yep.
Like, are you ultimately like, is it going to get you closer to your goal or is it going to set you back? Are you walking into a toxic like social event where everyone's just going to be like talking shit about people? Like, if that's the case, don't go. Like, that
Yep.
doesn't align with who you want to be, where you want to be, or what you want to be doing. So that's
I
it.
could not agree more. I love that quote. It does. It perfectly aligns. There's nothing else to say. Um, Mine was why overthink when it's so much easier to just let what must happen happen anyway, which also kind of aligns.
I love that.
Yep. Don't overthink. Say no if it's not going to work and move on. Like it's going to happen anyway. Don't be a part of it if you don't want to be.
Absolutely.
Finito.
Well, you guys know what to do. Like, subscribe, leave a review wherever you are listening, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening.